Um, well, I think perhaps it'd be.
We
as
haven't
well.
started yet.
No, but it would
just
be.
tell me where we.
Well, shall we start with when the airmen actually came to be billeted? Because
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
No, absolutely. And I think that you told me that before they actually came, a billeting officer came or something.
that's right.
did he, to
That's
inspect.
right. Yes.
So
Well, I'll start there.
Yeah.
To say about this. You
Yeah.
see.
Do you want to start that again? And
Oh.
then just carry on.
When they built RAF Lichfield, they didn't build any accommodation for the airmen, so they had to bring them into the villages to live with the families. So consequently, you had a billeting officer, he was called, came round to inspect the houses to see how many people were in any particular house. And we lived in a 3-bedroomed house with 3 large bedrooms, really. So he said that we could take 5. So we had 5 airmen billeted with us. I had a wonderful time with them, I did, because being a child I didn't realise the seriousness of the situation. They used to stand me on the table and put the Glengarry on my head and do a march past at night time and played games with me, and I suppose really, because some of those had got small children of their own, they were missing their kids and they were taking the place of my daddy. So, I really thought it was great fun, but it was the price they paid. Not only, I don't mean with their lives, I'm not talking about that, but the billeting officer, I think it was about 2pence for a bath. So that, and they designated they only needed 1 bath a week, and some of these lads were doing really dirty jobs. I think it was 3pence for the breakfast. And if Mum did do any laundry, which wasn't very often, well, she wasn't supposed to, but of course she did. She thought they were her lads and she was looking after them. I think she got 5pence or something for doing the laundry, for providing the soap and the heat for the water and all that sort of thing. They were very good. They sometimes bought little bits of bobs back from the NAFI for us. But when it was time for Santa Claus to come, I was very well looked after, thank you very much. They made me an armchair of my own out of the cases that the aircraft bits and pieces had come in. They made me a huge school desk. They made me a big blackboard and easel. The school desk was so big, would you believe, that Mum used to have to pile piles and piles of cushions on the chair for me to be able to reach the top of it, and I could virtually hardly lift the lid myself. And I was still using that when I went to Burton Tech. So, it did good service. And the armchair, all my daughters have used it, and all my grandchildren are now using it. So it certainly stood the test of time. We had one airman that was billeted with us. His name was Alec Curry, and he came from Ramsgate, and he got 3 sons, and they gave them some, I think it was it embarkation leave? He was being posted anyway, but they didn't give them enough leave to go home. So I think a lot of them were forbidden to go home on this particular leave. So whether it was for some big push or other, or what, I don't know. So Mum said, well, if Phyllis you can't go down to Phyllis, which is Alec's wife, obviously. Can Phyllis manage to get up here in the time? And he said, well, where will we put her? So Mum said, oh, don't you worry about that. We'll juggle it all around. And that's what happened. Mrs. Curry came and stayed for Alec's embarkation leave at our house. And there were 3 airmen in the one big bedroom and 2 airmen in the other bedroom, and I was in the back bedroom in my cot with Mum. So what she did was make the 4 of them sleep in the one big bedroom so that Mr. and Mrs. Curry could have the other bedroom. So, and then she didn't forget that towards the end of the war, she sent a letter up, and I'd never seen the sea, obviously. And we went down to Ramsgate, would you believe, for a week's holiday. And I nearly broke my arm in the park, and so I came back with my arm in plaster. So that was a bit of a, bad start really, never mind. But we used to lie in bed at night and listen to the aircraft taking off. Because if any of our lads weren't in at night and they were up on the airfield, she used to wonder if it was her lads flying overhead. So we used to count all the aircraft out, and then she used to count them all back in, She used to be still listening first thing in the morning when they should be coming back. So that's how I learned to count. I mean, I could count quite well by the time before I went to school. And I went to school when I was 4. So it was learning to count aircraft that did me a good turn, I suppose, really. And when that huge bomb fell, when they were trying to get the ammunition train along the railway here, which formed the gravel pit over the back, it shook the houses, cracked the plaster, and we'd got 2 fancy Toby jugs on the corner and 4 fancy china ashtrays that had come from Japan, all shrunk to paste before the war. 2 of the ashtrays dropped off and broke, and 1 of the Toby jugs. So I've still got 2 of those left, and I've still got 1 of the Toby jugs left. But Mum said, come on, we're going to get into bed. And I remember that. I remember it really plain, because she took me out of my cot and put me in bed with her, because she never used to let me get in her bed. And she put me in bed with her. She said, if old Hitler's going to throw a bomb and knock us out, she said, we'll go out in bed. And that's what she did. So she thought we were going to die, evidently. But
you've told me before about throwing mattresses onto your front lawn. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember. Not mattresses.
Didn't you say they came? You can have 3. You've got to have 3, or you've got to have 5.
No.
And they came round and threw the mattresses out.
Not me, Graham.
Not you. Right.
Not me.
Right.
No, they never provided us with any mattresses.
Right. So, one of these.
Excuse my tummy.
One of these was killed. Is that right?
Yes.
So could you tell us about that?
Well, he was an Irish boy. Obviously, I only knew him from hearing the others call him Paddy. I really don't know what his name was. But I do know that he'd got 5 sisters. And they were all nuns. And he left a tin box with Mum when he went. And he said, if anything happens to me, see that me sisters get it. And they never did get it. Because when Mum tried to find out where it had got to go and where it had got to be sent, nobody seemed to know what to do with it. So they never did get that box. But and I really don't know what happened to him. But I know he never came back. And it cast ever such a damper over the house for such a while. I mean, I know we weren't related to these lads, but when you'd all lived together, like, as a family, if you like, you did feel it. So, no, I don't really know what happened to him.
Right. Shall we, just while they were like my daddy,
Yes.
so now you're going to explain to us that your dad was actually
Yeah.
serving in the army.
Yeah. Well, we had the airmen because there was only Mum and myself in the house because my father was away during the war. He was in the army. So, from my perspective, it was quite a good thing, really, I suppose, having those airmen in the house to act as substitutes for my dad. So, really, I suppose I put a lot to thank them for as well. Because I know they played with me a lot and all that, but they weren't silly with me. If Mum said no, they backed her up. So I didn't get away with very much. And when my father eventually came home, because he'd been gone so long, I didn't know him, you know. I really didn't know him. And I remember us going to meet him off the train at Oliver Station, which is no longer with us. And I remember my mum saying, because I'd got my cousin with me as well, Kathleen, and she used to come and stay with us for a few days, holiday. And I remember Mum saying, if ever he goes for you before he goes for me, she said, I shall never forgive him. And what did he do? He kissed our Kath first. Oh, it's quite funny, really. But I didn't recognise him. I didn't know who he was. I mean, he got this great big moustache when he came home. I thought he was a half-price Father Christmas because he'd got no beard. It was quite funny, really, yeah. But when he kissed our Kath, I thought my mum was going to have a fit. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just pause.
Sorry, okay. If you just pop it back where it was, that's it. Okay.
Well, I've got here a telegram that we had come from the War Office, like a lot of the other people did. But fortunately, ours wasn't as dire as some of the other people's. Shall I read it out? I regret to have to inform you that a report has been received to the effect that 4967838 Lance Sergeant J.T. Buckley, Roy James of the 14th Battalion, the Sherwood Foresters, was wounded but remained on duty. And this was dated on the 27th of May 1944. The nature of the wound is slight. I am to express to you the sympathy and regret of the Army Council. Any further information received at this office as to his condition will at once be notified to you. Yours faithfully, I'm blowed if I can read it, Officer in Charge of Records. Mum had a turn. She really did. And we had to keep telling her, or the airman kept telling her, it's only slight, you know. But Dad was hurt and that was enough for her, you know. Still, God let him come home. But I also found today the pay slip that you used to get. And it says here, family allowance and state allotment, £1, 1 and 6pence. Qualifying allotment from your husband's pay, 10 and 6pence. London area allowance, 9 and 6pence. Total, £2, 1 and 6pence. So that was £2, 1 and 6 there. And on the other side it says, because that's what she's been receiving. So he'd evidently had a promotion. It says on the other side, allowance including qualifying allotment from your husband's pay and state allotment is £1, 15 shillings, which is a big difference from £1, 1 and 6. And children's allowance is 12 and 6. So her wages went up from £2, 1 and 6pence to £2, 7 and 6pence. She thought she was in 7th heaven because her wages had gone up. So I really don't quite know. All he says is sergeant. So he'd been made up to a full sergeant. So, yeah.
Can we? Great. We'll be away on to
Cutaway.
of
Yeah.
the thing. Won't we? You okay, Daisy?
Yeah. The allowance for children, marked star, above will not alter if his rate of pay changes. So it could have been made general and it made no odds.
I bet it would.
Probably, yeah.
You
Dear
ready?
me.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Right, Daisy, when you're ready.
I've also got this paper to show the allowances that my mother received during the war from my father and from the government, I suppose. And the first is the family allowance and state allotment, which states she gets £1, 1 and 6. The qualifying allowance from her husband's pay was £10 and 10 shillings and sixpence, and the London area allowance was 9 and 6, which came to the grand total of £2, 1 and 6, which in today's money would be £2, 7.5p to live on for a week. But whether or no, it looks as if he was promoted, because on the other side it says the state allotment now would be £1, 15 shillings. The child's allowance would be 12 and sixpence. Altogether it came to £2, 7 and sixpence. So that was a lot better. That was £2, 7 and 6 compared to £2, 1 and 6. She must have thought she was in heaven.
Good. That's lovely.
Old brain box, ain't we?
Stretching mine.
Okay, we're ready.
I've also got this piece of paper that shows the allowance that my father was given. No, I beg your pardon, I'm up the creek. I've also got this. It's to show the allowance that my mother got from my father. And it was family allowance and state allotment £1, 1 and 6. Qualifying allotment for husband's pay £10 and 10 shillings and sixpence.
Do you mind if I stop you?
I've got this that tells us what money Mum got to keep us through the war years. £2, 1 and sixpence, which in today's parlance would be £2, 7.5p. But it looks as if he got a promotion, because on the other side it tells us he's got £2, 7 and 6, which would be big money. But just imagine trying to keep a family on £2, 35 or 37.5p. Could you do it?
Fine. I think. Let's be closer.
I also remember when I first started school, we used to come out of school and at precisely the same time every day, an American convoy would come over the bridge with these big canvas covered wagons, and they used to throw out of the back Hershey bars and chewing gum and packets of chocolate powder, like Cadbury's drinking chocolate. Oh, we loved it. We really loved it. And we'd scramble and get it and take it home to our mum. And it got to be a regular thing, so we got as we waited to see if the Americans were coming, hoping that they hadn't gone early, because we were going to miss out on this chocolate powder. That was my favourite anyway. But my mum got really, really cross. If you were a bit late home from school, she'd say, I hope you haven't been waiting on that bridge for them Yanks to come past and throw this chocolate powder out, have you? You ought to come straight home from school, Daisy. But she used to like the chocolate powder for making cakes and drinking chocolate at night. She did. You know. But, of course, I didn't do a great deal of shouting, I've got to be honest. But some of the kids used to shout the old well-known phrase, have you got any gum chum? And everything used to come flying out the back. But I tell you, it was that chocolate powder I liked. I really, really liked it. Yeah. But old Mum did get cross. She really did. You come straight home from school, she'd say. Yeah. So if you got home on a reasonable time, whether they'd been over the bridge or not, and you'd gone home with the chocolate powder, she didn't seem too fazed. But she used to get really, really annoyed if you were a bit late. I suppose she was worried. I mean, you wouldn't really be allowed to, or try and let your kids walk home from school on their own today. But we used to. Mind you, there always used to be a big gang of us. You never used to go singly. So...
Tell me where the Americans came from.
Do you know, I'm not really sure. I think it was Sudbury. I think it was Sudbury that the Americans came from, but I couldn't be absolutely certain.
Right, and so it wouldn't be Whittington Barracks.
I don't think so.
No.
Unless-
So could you tell me that again? But starting it as a sentence, like, I'm not sure where the Americans came from, but I think it was Sudbury.
Yeah.
So that means we can edit it in.
Yes, okay. I'm not really sure where the Americans came from. I don't know whether it was from Sudbury. I really, really don't know. Just knew they were very welcome chucking out the chocolate powder.
Anything that you want to say about, I mean, it wouldn't be something perhaps that occurred to you at the time, but have you got anything that you want to say about the airmen's graves in Fradley Churchyard? And I mean, it doesn't matter if you haven't. Does it?
Well, I always go
And-
to the
and-
Battle of
and-
Britain service, and I
and
was
the
there
fact-
this Sunday.
the fact
I've
that
never
there's
missed
a,
one.
The fact that there's a German grave as well, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is a German grave, and we had him because nobody else would have him.
Right.
when
that-
you-
well, hold on. Nobody knows anything about this. That you're telling me from the beginning. It's not as though I've asked you a question, as though
Yeah.
you're telling me. So tell me about the fact that there are graves of Australian airmen and also a German in
Yeah.
Bradley Churchyard. Because we're going to take some pictures of those.
Yeah.
Perhaps with you looking at them or something like
Yeah.
that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Of course, you know, there's some war graves in Fradley Churchyard. They were always looked after by the locals at one time, but the War Graves Commission themselves, I think, do it now. And they always have a Battle of Britain service, so we still go up there and commemorate their lives. Mainly, they are Australians. In fact, more than 90% of them are Australians, but we have got one German flyer whose aircraft came down at Lullington. And he died. And would you believe nobody would have him? I suppose it was understandable at the time. But nobody would have him in their churchyard but Fradley. But when you look at it logically now, in this day and age, he was some mother's son, he was somebody's brother, or he was somebody's father. And he was doing exactly what our lads had been told they'd got to do. And they were obeying orders. So he got to rest somewhere.
Told us about Australian visitors coming and coming specifically.
Yes. Yeah. And we still get visitors now coming from Australia to visit these graves up at Fradley because they're still relatives of these lads coming over on holiday, be it nephews and nieces or grandchildren, but they're still coming. In actual fact, there was a brother of the one airman came over. I think it was about 4 or 5 years back. I mean, he was an old man himself, but he'd made that journey so that he could come to see where his brother lay. He said he'd always vowed that he would do it one day, and he'd actually done it. So fair play to him. The thing I was looking for a photograph of me in my wellies and my red, white and blue.
Were
I
there
couldn't
street
find it.
parties and things like that?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes.
Can
There
can
was,
remember-
you know that
just-
bungalow opposite
Yeah. No. Go on.
where Poppy Gardens is. There's a bungalow opposite
Yeah.
Poppy Gardens, and there was a lady and a gentleman lived there, and they decorated that bungalow up within an inch of its life with red and white flags.
Right.
And other folks had decorated it up.
So we'll do a bit on. Are you running?
I am running, yeah.
Tell us about what happened at the end of the war and the village celebrations and things like that.
Well, yes, we did have a party in the street, typical of everybody else in Great Britain at the time, I think. But at the time, I'd had some new wellies, and my mother couldn't get me out my wellies. So I was all dressed up with red, white and blue hair ribbons and red, white and blue ribbons tied round my wellies. And quite frankly, I remember that more than I remember eating the jellies and the fish paste sandwiches and the cupcakes that the mums made. But we had a wonderful time. But I remember them having a celebration down in the village hall as well. Well, it was the Oddfellows Hall, they called it in those days. But children weren't allowed to that reception. It was all just for the adults to have a beano, which was understandable. And I know that they gave, when the lads came home from the war, they had this party and they gave them certificates and a thank you for, you know, coming through and coming home, I suppose, and defending the right.
And people decorated the houses, did they?
Oh yes, there was quite a bit of bunting about, made out of all sorts of peculiar things, really. They'd cut tablecloths up and goodness knows what they hadn't cut up to make these flags. Sheets and all sorts of everything. But it was, yes, it was real jolly do. Weren't so many of us in those houses though up there then, because a lot of the houses weren't built in Wellfield Road. You know, they weren't built until well after the war. But no, we had a good time.
Tell me about the bungalow then.
Well, I can't remember the name of the gentleman and his wife that lived there. I got a feeling it was Fellows. But their bungalow, you couldn't put a knob pin where there wasn't a Union Jack or a picture of the King or a picture of the Queen. Everywhere, but everywhere, the bushes, the trees, the gates, the bungalow itself was absolutely festooned from top to toe. It looked absolutely wonderful. It really did. Absolutely, and it did. I do remember that ever so well. Because it was him that tied the red, white and blue ribbon round me wellies.
You talked about how you came to live in Wellfield Road, about your dad being told about the house and then going to ask somebody. And you
Yes.
moved. So
yes,
could you tell me about how you came to live in the village and what Wellfield Road was like when you came in?
Yes. My father, he worked at the Branston Depot. He had been a professional soldier and he was sort of still on reserve, I think, and they'd sent him to Branston Depot to work. Well, we were living just the other side of Brown Hills, and he used to come every day on his bicycle to Branston and then pedal all the way back home at night. So I think, I mean, he was a very fit man. He needed to be a very fit man. And someone there lived in Orrewus, and they told Dad about this house that was coming empty in Wellfield Road, or it had come empty, and that it belonged to Mr. Leavesley at the garage that he pedalled past every day, twice a day. And he called in on his way back and got the house. And that was how we came to live in Wellfield Road, and we were there for 51 years. And
So which house in Wellfield Road?
37. But in those days you didn't have a number, and it wasn't Wellfield Road. It was called RV. The house was called ARVI, and it was Furlong Lane. They'd got the lanes and everything mixed up, but that's what it was called when we moved in. And there was only that row of houses, from which is 34 now. Oh, and the bungalow. There was the bungalow all the way down the other side of Oakfield Road, and there were 2, 4, I think 6 or 7, 6, perhaps 8 houses the other side of Oakfield Road that were actually built. The houses from the bungalow down as far as the village hall on that same side were built, and up as far as where the old British Legion place used to be, and then the other side of the drive to the British Legion there were 2 pair of houses, and that was it. All the other houses didn't exist. The one side didn't exist. It was all cornfields in front of us, and then there were all the fields at the bottom that belonged to Mr. Swinfield. He used to drive his cows up the lane every day to and from milking, which could be a bit messy sometimes.
Now, can you tell me about the heavy snowfall in 1947?
Oh, that was hilarious. That was hilarious.
If you started by saying, in 1947 we had a heavy...
Yeah. In 1947, when we had that very heavy snowfall, obviously I wasn't that old. I'd be how old? 9? No, 8. 8. 9. I don't know. You lose your marbles when you get older. Yeah, I was 8 or 9 anyway. And my father had to dig a path down the drive to get us onto the pavement and then onto the road. And I couldn't see over the snow that my dad had thrown either side. It was like walking down a white tunnel. And then he dug down onto the road, and then all the other men in the street that were there, they were all digging down, so that they dug a passageway through to get down into the main street, so that we could get down to the shops. You know, it was really quite exciting to see it all going on. Couldn't imagine anybody doing it today, though. No. I couldn't. No.
Can't imagine having that snow now.
Oh no, you don't want that sort of snow.
Can you tell me also about in Wellfield Road or Furlong Lane, there was the large sandpit, about who used to play there and what you used to do there and so on?
Well, that is where they built the Royal British Legion club, the first one, and we called it the Pony Field. And it was quite a sizable sandpit in there. And your parents let you go. You could be in there all day because they knew that you were safe. And there'd be quite a crowd of you in there, a lot of the kids that were in Wellfield Road. And I remember pretty well all of them that were in Wellfield Road, Ian Kirkland included. And funny enough, I don't ever remember him coming in and playing in the sandpit. He perhaps did, I don't know. But we played for hours and hours in there. No bother to anybody, and we never got in any bother. Can't do that now with your children. You daren't just let them go that long. You'd be worried out your mind.
Can you remember the names of the people who you played with?
Yes. There was Sylvia Geary. There was Mavis Hyde, Jean Herberts, Myrna Toft, Maureen Shipley, Margaret Lister, who we all call Liz, and her sister Janet. There was Graham Stackhouse. There was Keith Ward. There was Sylvia, no she wasn't, Sheila Kendall, June Pattison, Carol Pattison, Tricia Pattison, Jimmy Pattison, and there was no children in the next house, and then there was Ruth and Peter Constable on the end.
Oh, right. Were they related to the teacher, the constable?
Yes, parents.
Right, okay.
The parents of Ruth and Peter.
And what about, I'm thinking particularly not of the shops necessarily, but local traders, because there was the reference to Daisy Cream Bun and the milk wagon that used to come along.
Oh yeah. It was a local baker. Archie Corbett was our baker. And I mean, they were few and far between, these fancy cakes really. And Archie'd come and occasionally he'd have a cream bun, you know. And after I'd had that first cream bun, every time I saw the baker pull up, I'm out there saying, "Have you got a cream bun, please, Archie?" So in the finish, he started to call me Daisy Cream Bun. And he called me Daisy Cream Bun for years. I love those cream buns. And then we had the milkman, Mr. Peach. He used to come round with his churns in the horse and cart, you know. And occasionally he'd let you, if you'd been good like, he'd let you ride in the back of the cart and help ladle the milk out with the big silver ladles out the churn into whoever's jug, or they were like, some of them had like cans with a lid on to go up to the door.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you remember about the surgery before it moved to Exchange Road?
Well, the first time I remember the surgery, it was in a house nearly opposite where J.R. Barker's, the veggie shop and wine shop used to be. Next door to what used to be called Bannister's Yard. And Dr. Rushen was the doctor then that lived there. And then Dr. Platt came. I was about 8 when he came. And he came straight out of the army. He was a young army doctor. And by God, he used to treat you as if you were like squaddies, you know. He was a cracking bloke, though. He really was. And he had his surgery in there for a long, long while. And then when they were going to have the one built, mind you, this is a while after being a little one, but after being in the house, he moved into the scout hut for a while that one was built down Exchange Road.
We talked earlier about, well, when we came over, about the Paul Pry. What do you remember about the Paul Pry?
I remember the village mortuary was there. And
Could you start off by saying, mentioning at the Paul Pry was a village mortuary, just, for the sake of the film?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something else, really. Because I was a member of the Girl Guides. And we'd been hiking. And we were coming back, and came back through Catton Park and that way down. So we got to the edge of the road because it was just a single either way. We haven't got a dual carriageway in those days. Waiting to come over opposite Leavesley's garage at the side of the Paul Pry. And we were stood there in sunshine, and it was raining on Leavesley's garage. I have never before seen it, and I have never seen it since. It rained. We couldn't believe it. We were stood there in the sunshine because we'd had a lovely, lovely walk, and it was raining.
That's strange.
On Leavesley's. But also at the Paul Pry was the village mortuary. So some kids used to get a bit frightened. Why? I don't know. I really don't know. But they used to say, "Do you think there's anybody in there?" Don't know. Yeah.
And so, do you remember anything of the hotel at all? Is it somewhere where you go? Did you?
No, because my father didn't drink. So he never went in the pubs as such, Mind you, saying that, he used to play cricket for the Navigation in the Orme Cup. But he wasn't a drinker, my dad. He was a lemonade man.
Right.
So, because his father had been a publican, and he said he didn't like the smell of it when he got up in the morning.
Yeah.
He never drank.
So, thinking of where the Paul Pry was, can you remember how the shops used to run? If you were walking from the Paul Pry down to, let's say, Kent's Bridge or something, can you remember the shops?
There was, as you're coming down the main street, on your right was the cobbler's shop, Mr. Hill, Humphrey, sorry, but we always called him Humpy. Do you know, I can still smell that leather. It's strange, because he'd let you go in there when it was cold, as long as you didn't chatter him to death. He was perfectly all right with your company in there. And then there was Horsley's shop on the left, grocery and that sort of thing. And then we had Mrs. Taylor's fish and chip shop. She was an amazing woman. She got like a little cafe thing at the back with perhaps 3 or 4 tables in the back and a one-armed bandit. And she used to make the pastry and the pies and cook fish and chips. She'd always got a cigarette dangling out the corner of her mouth with a great big ash hanging on it. And we used to be taking bets on whether it would land on the floor or in the fish pan. Dreadful.
And where did it often go in the fish pan?
I think so, yes. We all go out the door then.
Do you want to have a drink of your drink? I don't want to keep you away from your cup of tea.
Yeah. She was an amazing lady, she was.
So that's where Nick Collins had got his shop.
Yes,
there,
that's
was it?
right, yeah. And then, of course, there was Mr. Barker's. And then Mrs. Tranter, which is where the dentist is now. And then obviously there's Mr. Coates, the butcher. And Mrs. Wright, the haberdasher's next door to Coates.
Do you remember what used to be in the old bakery opposite Coates? Well, where the chocolates, the back of which used to be the chocolate maker. So it was a hairdresser's, but it's closed again now. Do you remember what used to be there?
I can't remember that, funny enough. No.
Nobody's really come up with that one.
No, can't really remember that. Strange, isn't it? No, I really can't. That's strange. Yeah.
It used to be a butcher's in days gone by.
Yeah,
A long time.
Mr. Houghton, wasn't it, that used to keep it, did he?
It was the Double O's as well at one time, but
Do you know, I don't remember that.
nothing's been mentioned about that in that sort of time period. The sort of 40s.
Must
50s.
have been gone then.
That's
Must have
right.
been gone.
And was the bank a bank when you were a kid, or was that something else?
No, that wasn't a bank. The bank is where the pottery thing is now. No, it wasn't a bank. It was I think it was just a house. Just a fair-sized house, yeah. No, it was never a bank. No, it wasn't a shop either, no. It was just a house, a residence. Excuse me.
Okay.
And then when you got past there, and then there was the post office round the corner.
Was the chemist on the corner when you?
It was a herbalist. There was a herbalist on the corner. Can't remember what her name was. Don't know if the kids thought she was a witch. Yeah, we were all frightened of her because the garden was overgrown and it was all overgrown round the house, and yet I think she was harmless enough. Yeah, then there was the post office, and then there was Mrs. Knight's, and that was a grocery and sweetie shop and all that. It's where I got my first bar of chocolate after the war, and they started bringing the bars of chocolate in. I bought one of those Cadbury's dairy milk tray bars, and it had got 6 little squares in it, and it cost 6p. And I took it home for my mum, and she said, "Oh, you shouldn't have spent all your money on me," because it was all my money. Yeah. And then there was we've got a video shop and all sorts up there, but that used to be the co-op.
Do you remember Hart's Garage?
Oh, by golly, I do remember Hart's Garage, yes. Yes. Because it was Barry Hart that taught me to swim in the river. And his dad used to fix the inner tubes up that were really beyond going back into anybody's tyres. They got more patches than they got rubber on it, really. He used to fix those up for the kids, you know, and blow them up, and we used to take them down to the river and use them to swim. Yeah. And yet Barry was younger than the majority of us, you know, and yet he could swim like a fish when he was about 4.5, 5. I remember him saying to me, "Come on, Daisy, jump in, I won't let you drown." Like a fool, I jumped off that river bridge, you know. Not just off the bank, off the bridge, splash. And he was sitting underneath on one of the piles with one of these rubber rings, and as soon as I hit the water, he was starting towards me. But he let me go on my own. It was only the dog paddle, but I got to the side, and that was all it needed to give me the confidence to go. I never looked back after that.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
It is indeed. No, I've done that. Right, can you tell me about the Clifton Country Cinemas. Tell me what it was like and who used to go and what
Do you know, to my everlasting shame, I remember it and I remember it well, but I don't remember going to the pictures with that gentleman that sent the email. I don't. It's shocking, isn't it?
It is. So tell me about
So I
it.
must have made an impression if
You
he
must have
remembered it.
If you could tell me, you know, where it was, what it used to
In
be
the
like.
Oribus Village Hall. And they used to arrive in a big green van, I remember. I know it was a green van. And unpack all this gear at the back, and great big rolls of film they were. And they used to whiz around, sticking all the chairs out in the rows, and then put all their gear up. They didn't put the gear up first and then put the chairs out. They put the chairs out first and then put the gear out. And they used to do a showing early on. I think it was from about 5 o'clock till 7. And then they used to show again from 7 o'clock till about 9, 9:30. So you went to the second house if you went to the 7 o'clock thing. And it used to be 9p and 1 and 6p, I think. 9p to sit at the front, or 6p, or I don't know, I seem to think 9p, because it took a whole week's pocket money, that did. So I only got 9p. And I was lucky if I hadn't gone to that, because my mum used to take 6p and buy a savings stamp at the post office and stick it in a book for me.
Do you remember any of the films that you saw?
They were nearly all cowboy films. Nearly all. Oh, I saw Uncle Remus, Song of the South. And it was Br'er Rabbit and Uncle Remus. Yes, it was called Song of the South, I think. I remember seeing that when I was little, and it made a big impression on me, because it was all that zippity-doo-dah, you know. I loved it.
Oh yeah, tell me about when you used to go haymaking with your mum.
Oh, I was only 3, but you know, I remember it. So I remember being chewed at a little bit, because she used to go and help. We always called him Grandpa Byrne. Please don't ask me why, I don't know. He's obviously somebody's grandpa that used to go, and we just called him Grandpa Byrne. And they had these big wooden hay rake things, and rake it all into like rows. And it had all come up in a nice big fluffy... Well, can you imagine? Little kids. It was absolutely ideal to dive into, wasn't it? Which we did with gusto, and really got into bother. But they'd have to go again the next day and rake it back the other way to make sure that it... And Mum loved it. I loved it as well.
And where was it you used to do that?
It was down the dock, you know where I mean, do you, the dock? And in the fields at the back. A bit akin to Tom Mellors. They were.
You were talking earlier about being the Girl Guides. I believe you were a Brownie and in the Girls Friendly Society. Can you tell me a bit about all those three? Where you did them, what sort of things that you did?
Well, it was all... there's a little room above... If you go down past the vicarage, the old vicarage, there's some steps smack opposite the mill stream that go to a door. Up those stairs is a room. The Brownies, the Guides and the GF, Girls Friendly Society, used to meet in there. And you did all the same sort of Brownie things as you do today, really. You know, doing your badges and learning to bandage somebody up and making your promise and campfires and all that. Same with the Guides, only that you could go away to camp. They didn't take Brownies camping in those days because they weren't old enough, they considered. But, yeah, Girl Guides. And we used to have swimming galas for the Girl Guides and all sorts of things. And the Girls Friendly Society was much the same, really, but that was run on church lines, whereas the Guides and the Brownies weren't.
I think I've already answered this one about how you learned to swim, but tell me the hen house story.
Well, I was about 4, and I've got such a clear memory of this. I really have. We had a family lived next door to us at that time. Name was Taylor, and there were 5 boys. And boys being what boys are, they were rumbustious sort of lads, like, you know, bit naughty. But they were always up to something, always up to something. So they must have devised this scheme of how, because I mean we couldn't get eggs, could you? You see, during the war years. So they must have got this scheme in their head, because the hen houses used to be in a field where our new school is now in the village. And there were all these different hen houses dotted round with padlocks on the door. And they belonged to Mr. Jack Swinfield, whose farm at that time opened out onto Furlong Lane as it is now, across the road and into the field. So they took me with them because I was the smallest. And they pushed me through the bob holes in the hen houses. And I handed the eggs out to the boys, you see. Well, when they'd evidently, I think they'd got 2 each, so they must have had 10. And they gave me 2 when I came out to shut me up. Of course, I went home chuffed to death with these eggs. And Mum, I could see my mother yet. We had red tiles in the hall, and she was on her hands and knees cardinaling these red tiles. And she had like a sacking apron over her other apron so she wouldn't get all this cardinal all over her. I remember saying, "Look, Mummy, look." And she said, "Oh, Daisy, where have you had those from?" And I said, "Out the field." "No, tell Mummy where you've had them from." "Honestly, out the field?" Well, as far as I was concerned, yes, I had them out the field. She said, "Oh, you better come and show me." She must have been agitated because she only took the one apron off, because she never went anywhere with any apron on. She always used to take it off, even if she only went to the gate. And but she got another one underneath this old sacking thing. So she took that off, took me down the alley by the bungalow that led into that field, and I showed her where I'd had it from. Even took her to the right hen house, I think, and through there. And so Mum does no more. She didn't bring me home. She took me straight across the road and down to Mr. Swinfield's and hammered on his great big front door. Now, I wasn't very tall, I don't think, but it got a great big oak door, you know, that shape, with all the studs on it. And Jack Swinfield, it was his lunchtime, you see. And he came to the door and he said, "Now then, Mrs. Buckley," he said, "what's all this?" She said, "Well, I've got something to show you, Mr. Swinfield," she said. "Our Daisy's come home with these," and she opened her hands, you see. She said, "I don't know what you're going to do with her." She said, "I don't know whether I've got to take her home," she said, "and smack her, put her to bed." She said, "or whether you want to send for the Bobby." She said, "Because she's been in your hen house and they're locked, aren't they?" And he said, "Yes." Yeah, I could see him looking down at me like this, and he said, dear me," he said, "are you going to be naughty again? Are you going to take anything that isn't yours again?" He said, "or do I have to send for the Bobby?" I said, no. Don't send for the Bobby, I don't, because all you could, you know, terrified the thought of the policeman coming taking you away from your mum and everything, weren't you? He said, "Well, if you promise me," he said, "you'll never do anything like that again." He said, "We won't send for the Bobby this time." He said, "and I'll leave the rest to your mum." "That all right, Mrs. Buckley?" She said, "All right then, Mr. Swinfield." And off we went, me shaking in my boots. Went to bed. When I got home, that was that. But do you know that we never went a week after that, but what we didn't get half a dozen eggs on our doorstep. There's those blue sugar bags they used to put the sugar in, and there used to be 6 eggs wrapped in newspaper, individually wrapped in newspaper, shoved in one of those sugar bags from Jack Swinfield. Yeah.
And where did he live?
Well, you know where Peter Coates' farm is? Butcher's shop is.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's all those houses at the side.
Oh, right. So
That was all Jack's.
So was that where it was his
his
house
farm.
there as well?
Yeah, it's a big one as well.
Oh,
Big
right.
farmhouse there.
What a shame that's gone.
And
Can
he
I
went.
just ask you to move? Can I just move those tissue packets?
Are they?
It's just crinkling
Making a
every time
noise.
You, yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry,
it.
I'm
Not
sorry.
a big deal, but oh right, oh what a lovely story.
Yeah,
Lovely
yeah.
story,
We never
isn't it?
went without any eggs after that, all through the wall. Oh, Jack, God bless him. Yeah.
That's nice. Now I know you told us this before when we did the other film, but I wanted to tell me again about Mr. McKnight and the ice and about what it was like at school generally. Any memory, particularly the testing the ice on the canal.
Yeah, well, he was very strict, was Mr. McKnight, very strict, but very fair, very fair. And when we used to get hard freezes, then he used to, because obviously children like sliding on the canal, and you say don't go near the water, but they will. But he always used to go out and test the ice to see whether it was safe to go on. And if it was safe to go on, then he would let you go on, but so many, like if you half the class went on at the morning break, and then half the class went on at the afternoon break, and there was always somebody to watch out for you at dinner time in case everybody tried to dash on at the same time. But we used to love it when he tried the ice. We did, because we all had to stay obviously the other side of the school wall, and we always used to stand there and wait to see him fall through it. He never did. He wet his foot once, I think. Once. But he never actually went through it. But we all used to think, he'll go in this time, he'll go in this time. He never did.
And what was life like at school generally? Can you remember some of the lessons you did and the teachers you had and so on?
Well, I've got to tell you, I loved school. I really, really loved school. And I cried when I left. I didn't want to leave. I loved it. So everything seemed a joy to me. I know that some of the kids hated it with a passion, but I loved it. I think there was only one teacher we had that could be said that was a bit on the nasty side. Very short-tempered. Oh, two, beg your pardon. One lady and one man. But we found out after that the lady was suffering badly from cancer. So really, in those days, I don't think they could do as much to keep pain under control as they can today. So, in retrospect, you have to forgive her for that. But I don't know what was up with the fella. But I know one of the mothers gave out some justice. I shall never forget that. Mrs. Payne, her name was. And she'd 3 sons and a daughter at that school. And Charlie was a bit of a lad. And like all of us, he could talk for the World Cup. And he was being a bit sassy, I think. And I think he said something about go and bag your head to somebody, you know how you do when they're being stupid. And Mr. Malibon, I must remember to call him the proper name because we called him Marrowbone. Mr. Malibon heard and said, I'll bag your head. And made him stand on his head in a waste paper basket, you know, up the corner. And then when it came to playtime, he made Charlie stay in the cloakroom. He couldn't go out to play. Anyway, come time to go back in after playtime, no Charlie. He'd gone home. And he'd fetched his mother. And when Mr. McKnight came into the classroom, all hell was being let loose because she was trying to append him into the basket. It was it was chaos.
So in front of the kids?
In front of the kids.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Oh, okay. This was. Tell me about the story about when you were gated because of going to the cricket.
Oh. Well, I was already gated. I must have done something because Mum wasn't a big believer in thrashing the hide off you, you know. You got occasional smacks and what have you. But if you'd done something that was really beyond the pale, you didn't go anywhere, say, for a week or... At a month, the longest I've been gated for was a month. And it was during this month of being gated that we went to the cricket, because Mr McKnight, his son-in-law, was Donald Carr, who was captain of the Derbyshire County Cricket Club at that time. He went on to serve at the MCC. Anyway, whenever they got a match at home, he used to organise a field trip, Mr McKnight had, and fill the sharrer up, as he called it. We'll have a sharrer and go. And he used to fill it up with all the kids in the last 2 classes, so you could go and watch the cricket. Well, it just so happened, as I say, I was on this period of time where I was being gated, but it was in school time, you see. So my mum wouldn't say I couldn't go because it was a field trip. And off we went. And it rained, stop play. So we came back early, didn't we? So me, instead of going home, like I ought to have gone home, I went up to Fradley to play at my friend's house up at Fradley, up at Peter Watson's place. And when I got in for the time I should come back off the coach. I'd timed it to the minute, more or less. And my mum said, where have you been, Daisy? I said, you know where I've been. No, she said, where have you been? And I thought, hey up, what's to do here? So I said, you know that we went on a field trip with Mr McKnight and we were going to see the cricket. She said, well, before we go any further, she said, let me tell you before I ask you again where you've been, that when your dad came home for his lunch at dinner time, he put the radio on to get the results to see how they were doing. She said, and rain had stopped play, so where have you been? I thought, well, flip me. Even the radio's let me down.
And so what happened because of that?
Another 2 weeks added on to the gating.
That's bad.
To you.
Okay, about the village dances then. Can you tell me about the village dances?
Yes, I used to go to the dances in Orrow's Village Hall, chaperoned by my
Can we start
mother.
that again, because we had the postman delivery there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I used to go to the village dances, but I was always chaperoned, as you might say, by my mother. I couldn't go to a dance without my mum. She wouldn't allow it. And I started going... I could understand it when I was very young, you know, because she started letting me go to these dances when I was 12 and she'd come with me, because they were starting to do this bebop and jive and that. You're not doing that, you're going to learn to dance properly first, she said. So she came with me to make sure I didn't do any of that sort of nonsense, and there were no boys involved, you see. But she carried on doing that right until I got married. Whenever I went to a dance, so my mum came, because the RAF camp was here, wasn't it? And the barracks. So there always used to be plenty of dances. Everybody used to dance. I mean, this thing they're doing on the telly is nothing new, really, is it? And she used to come, and I've got to tell you, Peter, she had more dances than I did. She never sat a dance out. We'd walk into the naffy and they'd say, oh, here's Daisy with her mother.
So what was it like in the village hall when you used to go to the dances there?
Well, the hall itself didn't look too dissimilar to what it looks today, except that, of course, there wasn't that stage up there. And, of course, we've had a piece built on the front a bit, I think, since then as well. But they were good dances, and it was always live music. It wasn't two records. It was always live music. And they were always very, very well attended. We had... Bill Pendleton used to come and play with his, I don't know, there's 3 or 4 of them. Roy Norton. I can't remember any of the others now. But we used to have no end, and it was all live music. It was good. It was good.
Do you remember any at the well, would have been the Working Men's Club then, the Scout Hut? Did you get?
I only ever went to one there, and I can't remember on what occasion it was, because that was the Working Men's Club. Because my dad used to go there. I was talking to John Barker about it the other day, and I said it was a Working Men's Club, wasn't it, John? And he said, yeah, it was. He said we used to play snooker and cards and all that. He said. He said, I remember the night that your father came to my house, he said, and we played solo, he said, till 5 o'clock in the morning, he said. And your mother told him he couldn't come to my house again.
Going back to when you were a kid, what sort of things did you play? Or where did you play?
We used to play in the street, virtually, or in the fields, wherever, because if you got permission to go in the fields, you were all right. But you knew in those days that you didn't go and play in fields that were sown, that had got corn in, got potatoes in, you know. I mean, you knew that it wasn't green grass growing, it was corn or wheat or what have you. So you didn't play in those sort of fields. But you used to, and you could play in the street. We used to play kick the can and skip and what they call it, tap it and run or something.
Can you remember the rules for kick the can? Wasn't it something, we used to play that?
Kick the can hierarchy or something.
People used to hide, and then
that's right.
If you were found, somebody come and kick the can and release everybody or something like that, was it?
I think you had to kick the can if you could get back to base before you were found, wasn't it? I think it was. I think you had to kick the can so that they knew you were safe. I think it was.
Right, I'll have to find out.
I can't remember.
No.
I can't remember. And I tell you what as well, we used to, before Oakfield Road was built, obviously it's got a big oak tree, this is where its name came from. That was where our garden went, because we had huge gardens in those houses at Wellfield Road. They took a huge thumping chunk off it and built 3 houses and garages on the other people's things. But it went straight the way down, not too far from that oak tree. And it was real handy to just get up. And it had got a right size like that onto this one branch. It was like sitting in an armchair, and I used to go and sit up there with a book for hours. And my mum used to come out and she'd shout, "Daisy, your tea's ready," and come down the tree. Yeah.
So what sort of things were there for teenagers to do in the village?
Well, not a lot really. As I say, it was just the guides. Well, not for teenagers, was it? No, not a lot. Not a lot. We used to collect on the benches by the War Memorial, have a chat or something like that, you know. And in front of the village hall, because there was a wall in front of the village hall in those days. And if you sat looking out into the road, your feet, well, my feet didn't, used to touch the road. But if you sat with your back to the road, the ground was higher, so you could sit there as if you was just sitting in a normal chair. And in fact, I was sitting on that wall when the only time my dad ever laid a finger on me, he scuffed my ears one night when he was coming back from Bill Simpson's. He'd been to have his hair cut, because Billy Simpson used to be the village barber. And he'd been and had his hair cut. And he was coming back up Wellfield Road, and I was sitting on the wall, talking as per usual. And my dad had bought me a watch about 3 weeks prior to, because he was very much to time. A minute before or a minute after was no good for me dad. If you said 12 o'clock, then 12 o'clock it was. And I had to be in for 7. And it was gone 7. It was 7:05 as he came past, and he went, "But you're a watch and you still can't tell the time." By gad, I think I was in the house faster than he was, and he was on his bike. Oh, dear.
Now, on the way over, you were telling me about walking on the quarter-mile bridge.
Oh, yeah. I've been trying to think who was there with us. I think we might have been coming home from Sunday school, the one day. Sure we were. just can't think who was there. I know Terence Bradley was, because he got into bother as well. I think Jan Watson was. But we used to go down to the canal and along past the mill stream and down to the river and what have you. You know, you could see the kingfishers and all sorts of things down there. And but we used to dare each other to walk along the rail to see how far you could get across. If you could, you were king of the castle if you could get from the mill stream across the whole job lot and come off at the end on the other side on the Trent, you know. I never got that far. But I did have a go. But unfortunately I did it in my new Witt shoes. And off I went and landed in the water. And my mum, to say the least, was not at all pleased, because not only was it my Witt shoes that were wet through, it was my Sunday best as well, clothes. Because you did have your Sunday best in those days, you know. So
did you go to church?
Yeah.
As well as, so, because not many people have talked about church. What sort of, have you got any memories about going to church, particularly, that you can tell me? Without getting anybody into trouble?
Yes. I used to go to church every Sunday morning. We used to go to church. I even used to go to church on the days when Mum wasn't going to church. So it wasn't as if I went under pressure. Don't know. I was in there one Sunday with Barbara Barker and that, and you know how boys put the fingers in the mouth and whistle like that. And we'd been trying to do that for ages, Barbara and I. And I don't know, something solemn must have been going on, and Barbara said, "Just imagine if you whistled." And I said, "What, like that?" And blew, and it happened. I've never done it before, and I've never done it since. And this huge whistle went whistling round the church. Why does it always happen when you don't want it to happen? Always. Do you know, I must have been a horrible child thinking about
it. Was
it.
Fun, I think, wasn't it? Which is nice. I think kids are suppressed a bit now.
Dear me.
Tell me about the Orrrush show. You were telling me about that. What you remember?
Oh yes, we used to go down to Orrrush show because it was quite an occasion to see all these heavy horses and the cattle close to and all that sort of thing. And see a lot of the local farmers competing really, and see who was going to win the largest turnip or onion or what have you in the horticultural side as well. Because in the village there was an awful lot of competition for that. Oh, red hot competition for the horticultural side. But Mum always insisted yet again that I went in me white sandals and that, you know, she to doll you up for going off. And then I used to get chewed at when I got back because the shoes were dirty. What do you expect on a show field? But, you know.
So can you tell me something about where it was and what sort of attractions were there?
Well, they didn't have attractions as such the way they do today. There were tractors, and there were, when the cars were getting more popular, they'd have stands for cars, but basically it was tractors and combine harvesters and ploughs and that sort of thing, you know, hay-making machinery. And yeah, it wasn't so much like you do. We didn't have a fair. I seem to, wait a minute, I think they had a roundabout. I think it was only one roundabout.
Do you remember any of the carnivals or processions that used to go through the village?
The British Legion used to do one every year. They used to have a carnival queen. And I think Joan Dakin was carnival queen one time, and Beryl Prince one time. One I can't remember.
So did different organisations do floats or streets, and how big were they? You know, do you remember being lots
Well,
of?
there used to be quite a few floats at one time, yes. Perhaps the butcher would do one, or the post office would do one, or the brownies and things like they will today, the brownies and that will. But it was more local businesses that used to get involved, really.
And that
Yeah.
wasn't connected with the Oribus show?
No, it was entirely different. Entirely different. No. The show and the British Legion Carnival were, you know.
Right. Okay. Well, I've done my questions there. Is there anything else that you remember that you want to say? Because we're talking about places which you have, and education which you have, and recreation and employment. What did you do when you left school?
When I left this school, I went to the Technical College in Burton. And because I wanted to be, when I left school, I wanted to be a motor mechanic. And it caused all sorts of furore in the family. My mum has got one sister, or had one sister, Auntie Ada. Oh, Dolly, you can't let her do that. A girl doing a motor mechanic? Never heard anything like it. No, she's either got to work in an office, or with children, or a shop. That's the sort of thing girls do. They're not motor mechanics. So I ended up going to the Technical College for a year. I hated every minute of it. But I did it. I did my shorthand, I did my typing, I did my bookkeeping and all that sort of malarkey. Then when I left there, I went to work for Bass Worthington, the brewery. And you've seen these films, haven't you, about these Dickens-type offices with long, high desks and big, tall stools. Even the blooming blokes looked all screwed up and in there. They were that high, the stools, that I couldn't get on them properly. I used to have to climb up them as if I was going on a ladder. And I worked in an office like that. And the ledgers were nearly half a ton to move. They were huge, the ledgers were. And you were recording all the beer barrels, the firkins and the hogs and the, you know. And to tell you the truth, I've always used the word firkin as a naughty word since.
So did you ever become a motor mechanic?
Well, would you believe? Yes, I did. But how old was I? I was married and got children. And I went to Tamworth. And it was when in the 80s. I did it in the 80s. I passed my driving test. So I did that all surreptitiously. Didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I never told my husband. I never told my children. Nothing. I went for a couple of lessons, but I'd always been driving on the land. Not on the road, but I'd been driving on the land. But when I had my couple of driving lessons, the lady that was taking me said, "Oh, you seem to have enough road sense. And what have you?" She said, "And you can steer, you can change gear. I'm going to send for a test for you," she said, "because it takes ages for a test to come." That was in the October. My test was on the 4th of January. So she took me for 2 hours before I went for my test on the 4th of January, and I passed it. And of course, when my husband came home from work, I whacked my piece of paper under his nose. "Look what I've done, look what I've done." And he said, "Oh, you crafty faggot." He said, "When did you do that?" He said, "You never said." I said, "No." I said, "I didn't want any discouraging remarks." I said, "I wanted to go off full of confidence." I said, "And if I'd have failed, I wouldn't have told you anyway, you know." And anyway, he said, "Oh," he said, "well done, well done." I said, "Right, now can I borrow the car tonight?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, that's no good, is it?" "Well, do you know, I was a fortnight before I touched a car again. And that was my own. I got that without saying anything. A White Avenger. And it was cracking. It was in pristine condition. And Jim came home and he says, out the corner of the "Who's here?" I said, "Nobody." He said, "There's a White Avenger outside." I said, "Yes, I know." I said, "It's mine." And he said, "Well, I hope you think," he said, "when I've come home after doing a day's work, I'm going to do maintenance on your car." I said, "No, I don't think that." He said, well, somebody will have to fix it. I said, I'll do it myself. I've enrolled at the technical college at Tamworth. And he said, you never have. I said, I have. I said, don't you worry about me, pal. I said, it's something I've always wanted to do. I said, and how many times have I helped you? I said, when you got that Land Rover in pieces. I mean, always used to be there, up to my elbows in grease and what have you. And I don't know why, Peter. I don't know why. It was just something that always fascinated me. All sorts of engineering does. When I went to Scotland about 5 years ago, Robert said to me, where would you like to go first? I said, I must go to see the Falkirk Wheel. He said, pardon? I said, the Falkirk Wheel. I've got to see the Falkirk Wheel. I said, and I've got to see a boat go up. And he said, but why? I said, because I've only seen it on the television. I said, and I've got to go and see it actually work. He said, oh, you're a funny woman.
But you see, nowadays,
some people
if
you do
into
that.
Engineering, you'd have been encouraged to do it.
Do it,
you
yes.
know?
But you see, you weren't then.
No,
I mean, they were absolutely horrified. The thought of me wanting to get involved, you know.
So, when you left school, did you have any qualifications or did you have any careers advice?
Nope. No, we didn't have careers advisors then. No, you just paddled your own canoe or went to the, what did they call it, the Labour Office or something like that. Employment Exchange or something. No. Mind you, I never went there. So I know I had a series of 9 jobs one year. But you see, you could do that then.
Yeah.
You could do that. I was never, ever out of work.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, I remember. I mean, I left school in the 70s, but I always remember that it wasn't a matter of whether you'd get a job. It was just a matter of what kind of job you'd do. There was never any fear of not getting a job.
No, no.
You could always get something.
I mean, I could turn my hand to virtually anything. You know, or I could.
Yeah.
But I had 9 one year. Because my mother said, I despair of you, I'm going to put you in service. I said, you're not.
Do you remember anything about the pubs in the village? Did you ever, or was it not?
The navigation was the place to go. The navigation, because they had that big room that is now a restaurant, I think. And they had a jukebox and all that sort of malarkey in there. So you could go up there and boogie. You know, you could go up there and dance. Mind you, I think the Home Garden, that used to meet up there, you know, during the war, in the navigation.
Yeah, it seemed to be the most popular pub. What about the other ones in the village? Were they?
I think they were perhaps a bit more staid. Perhaps they hadn't got the same sort of room, really, as the Navy had, because that had got an absolutely enormous big room. And it had got a little snug as well as the bar. So, yeah. The same, my dad used to play cricket for them. Got a medal somewhere with it on. When
Do
they
you remember
won
what the cricket's pavilion? Well, before they built the Haddock Pavilion years ago. No, that would have been. Do you remember much about the cricket field?
I remember the old cricket field, but they'd always got a pavilion, as I can remember.
Yeah, I think it was a lot earlier when they didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just about to finish the tape, so I'm going to stop.
So I
there.
remember the field being, because it used to be strip farm, that field had. You know, in the years when they used to, the farmers, the villagers, had a strip of land. Well, that field used to be where they used to do the strip farming. So when they reached a stage where it was no longer being strip farmed and they allowed it to grass over, it was all like that, hummocky, like that. And the outfield of the cricket club, the cricket pitch, used to run into that. And you could see them sometimes, the boy would go out of the boundary line and they'd be going over the hummocks like that. And the cricketers run after them and there's all water line and they'd be wet through when they come back. Yeah. 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 Dear me.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, it's changed a lot, that hasn't it?
Yeah. It has a terrific difference there. Yeah. It used to be good to ride your bike over there as well when you were a kid, you know. The forerunners of the BMXs, I think. Yeah.
I'm going to stop it there.